for taking out the time. We know like things are quite busy at your end. Really excited to, get into the depth of the conversation and really understand what's been going on and get the real perspective. So yeah, please, if you can just introduce yourself.
My name is Jessie Clyde. I've been an advocate for abortion rights for decades now, supporting work in Africa, Asia, Latin America, Middle East, and Eastern Europe. I was the director of the grant-making program at International Women's Health Coalition for a number of years, which is when I had the awesome opportunity to work with you all. More recently, I've been supporting the integration of IWHC's body of work into FosFeminista, which is a new alliance for sexual and reproductive health and rights and justice. I live in New York City. I have 2 kids that I'm raising to be feminists. And yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, I just want to thank you for reaching out. It's been a really tough few weeks in the United States. I'm sure you heard of the sort of white supremacist driven murder of 10 Black people in Buffalo. We just hit 1 million deaths from COVID this week in the United States. And then obviously we're seeing this attack on abortion rights. So, just want to really thank you all for reaching out. That sort of global solidarity that we all feel helps a little bit. So thank you.
We've been hearing about the news as well about the hate-filled, hate-driven incident, and I think it's become sort of synonymous across the world, and these I feel that the right-wing extremist ideologies are sort of it's on the rise as well. I think even back home we've got the minority propaganda that's been constantly ongoing with the help of the media, and violence against the minorities like Muslims and Dalits here back in India as well. So yeah, absolutely, like in solidarity with you all the time. I think it's times like these when the fact that we stay connected is what matters, and share our pain and joy in these trying times. So yeah, as someone who has been born, like brought up in US and have stayed there, how do you feel that the impact that the Roe v. Wade has sort of had on abortion rights and access to abortion and the general attitude towards abortion in the country and even beyond that? So how has your experience and what is your understanding of in that context been?
Yeah. So Roe was, as we all know, the 1973 Supreme Court decision that established abortion as a constitutional right in the United States. So, as a kid, I remember learning about this right, from my mom when I was really young, and definitely feeling proud to live, in a country where abortion was recognized as a right. And I also remember, when I started to travel for work and leave the country, I always really remember feeling that, if I were to get pregnant, I could always go home. And that was really reassuring. And, in that sense, I did feel that the US was an example for countries where abortion rights were much more restricted. But, and importantly, Roe has always been, very, very flawed since the start. The reproductive rights community and movement in the United States has rightly been, very heavily criticized for, really focusing on and centering white women, for, focusing pretty exclusively on sort of the legal right and choice, and less so on access to abortion and other, reproductive justice issues like the right, to parent your children in safe communities. And, for decades now, women of color led reproductive justice movements have been, documenting and raising the alarm on how, the ongoing and increasing restrictions on abortion access in the United States have been, disproportionately affecting communities of color and other communities that have been, historically excluded from the health system here. And I say this because obviously overturning Roe, will be catastrophic, but it's not as if things are particularly great right now in this country with regards to abortion access. I'm sure you've heard of sort of the TRAP laws, the targeted restrictions on abortion providers. These are laws that are really expensive, medically unnecessary. We have parental consent laws. We have, restrictions on insurance coverage, restrictions based on gestational age. I think, there's only one abortion clinic in Mississippi right now. So the situation is already very dire, even before Roe was overturned.
It's similar to the fact that, when the whole COVID thing happened and the pandemic struck, and we were all just suddenly questioning our health infrastructure and how strong has it been. But then if you technically think about it, was it ever really strong? I mean, there were always communities who have always been left out, in terms of getting access to good services and, dignified services. And especially at a time when we're supposed to be moving forward. The understanding that we are with the especially with the Me Too movement and the whole conversations that are coming up with regards to gender inequality and patriarchy, it is certainly it's become a conversation of the norm, or like at least in the popular references it's become a thing. But clearly when it comes to the real policies and things that actually affect individuals' lives, there's not much change, and we seem to be moving backward. And similarly, I think it was even with regards to India, I think India also recently had an amendment to our abortion law, and very similar. So, I mean, while there are some things that, we should look forward to, like there was the limits, like earlier it was only for married women. So now that particular term has been removed, which is a good thing. But at the same time, they have introduced medical board at at a later gestation. And then again, that's like a third barrier for the woman, and that just increasing the time. So I mean, it is in a way that things when it's sort of, we did move forward, but again in not a very inclusive way. And then the whole conversation on eugenics as well is very extremely discriminating and extremely so these are things that we're not looking at in detail. In terms of your the work that you've been doing with ASAP or with other regional organizations, other regions as well, how do you feel that for example, and US politics has always had a very so to say influencing role. It's the hegemony is like that it directly indirectly affects the politics and issues across the world as well, especially in Asia and other neighboring regions. So how do you think that, so for example, like the global gag rule, and the kind of impact that had on funding of organizations, local organizations who've been working on especially on safe abortion, the kind of impact that it had to their work, and then further then the negative impact on accessing the services for the women living in those countries. So if you could share a bit about that as well.
One, so if Roe is overturned, what we saw in the leaked briefing is that Justice Alito described it as egregiously wrong, the Roe itself. And he said it was wrong because essentially it protects a right that was not included in the Constitution, and was not sort of protected by the original meaning of the Constitution. And this is particularly terrifying because of what this could mean for other rights, including like the right to marry, the right to contraception. So it's and then
it's never going to stop at that, right? It's not going to stop at that.
Exactly. And that's what folks are trying to raise the alarm about, and to get the attention of people who might not necessarily be so focused on abortion rights, but might sort of make the connections between other rights. And then also terrifying is just that over half of the states in the U.S. Have measures in place that will ban abortion immediately as soon as Roe is overturned. And in a country with really high maternal mortality rates, where Black women are 3 times as likely to die from pregnancy-related causes as white women, it's terrifying. So just to sort of emphasize the impact in the United States. In terms of globally, I think we don't really know. I was actually listening this week to a podcast with Terry McGovern, who's the the chair of the Department of Population and Family Health at Columbia's Mailman program, where I studied public health. And she was talking about how, the U.S. has always used the global gag rule to restrict access to abortion, has tied the global gag rule to various funding mechanisms like PEPFAR. But historically, at least Roe was there. I think she described it sort of as a guardrail. And now without it, it'll be much more at the whim of administrations. Also scary in a country where the right wing is increasingly gaining political power. So, I think also, we know that the right wing globally will really use this. They will feel emboldened by this decision. A lot of anti-rights movements globally are, rooted in the U.S., funded by the U.S., and this will certainly be used, to rally the masses. But, to be slightly optimistic, I also think, the tide is in our favor. The World Health Organization's abortion guidelines, that just came out recently, they affirm abortion as a right, they affirm abortion as essential to healthcare. And then, we've also seen, great victories in Argentina and Colombia and Mexico lately. So I'm determined to stay optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope. That's the way forward. I think that's what will keep us going. So absolutely. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing it. And regarding the thing that you said, absolutely, in the beginning, that the fact that it's not going to stop at just abortion, they're going to go into into contraception, and then your right of getting married, of who you can stay with, and it's sort of just like a window, a door that opens. So definitely it's scary, and like you said, because the effect and the impact that it has across the world, back here at home and across the country, like in Asia at least, we are also watching it very closely to see how it unfolds. The new government that has come in place recently, and we haven't been coming across a lot of statements, of course, directly from the president or the vice president themselves on this thing. So if you can shed a bit more light about what's their opinion, what's the Democratic Party's opinion has been of, if they're going to take any actions on it, if, what are their, if they have any plans.
One thing that we've certainly learned in the United States, and we saw under the Obama administration, is the Democratic Party is not bold enough on this. They even shy away from saying the word abortion. Oftentimes you hear them talking about, reproductive access or reproductive services, but, there still really is a fear, I think, about being bolder. What we've seen in recent weeks, I think, that is important is, really, those of us that support abortion rights, trying to remind politicians, including Republicans, that the majority of Americans do believe in the right to abortion. And so, there's been widespread demonstrations across the United States. I was marching in Brooklyn, last weekend. And so trying to get that message across. And then, to your earlier point, I think, folks are doing a good job of, trying to show that, if we really do consider, Roe as being wrongly decided, then this is terrifying for other rights. Also, just trying to raise the alarm about, we're seeing there's been legislation put out there to categorize abortion as homicide, to make it illegal for folks to leave the state to access abortion care, to outlaw telemedicine for abortion pills. So it's about more than the procedure itself. So yeah, but no, I mean, politicians are not doing enough to answer your question.
And now, like, just I have a last question now, thinking about the women who are going to be directly affected by this in the country. And so what do you think is going to be their resort? now, if given that if things get more, if we move towards a more stricter laws or regulations towards and general like attitude towards safe abortion, as you're saying, it's like a narrative is being built, right? So if that happens, so what is going to be the last option if a woman who might end up with unintended pregnancies, or are there any organizations who are still providing like is there going to be a shift towards more like self-managed abortion? Also, one last question, that what advice is someone, as someone who's been a funder yourself of the work and been a part of the movement, what would you want to say to other funders and other people listening in who support the work across the world, and like how can they support abortion rights movement, and like even if you want them to, if you want to give out any message, any words of motivation? So
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in terms of access, I mean, if Roe is overturned, what this means is that, many pregnant people will have to leave their state to access care. And some folks will be able to do that. People with the means to travel will travel.
and again, I
Others,
think here it's the marginalized communities will suffer, right? It's eventually
exactly.
what will happen is even the people who are behind, who want to change these laws, their wives and their people associated with them, if they might want an abortion, they'll go and get it done at a
Of
higher
course,
price in a different place completely. And who
of
will
course.
suffer? It's the people who are already vulnerable. Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sorry, please go.
Yep. No, completely. Undocumented folks, immigrants, rural, or and yes. Many will, turn to, who can't travel, will turn to other methods, and that could be, accessing abortion, from an unskilled provider, which could be unsafe, or it could mean accessing, medication abortion, which we know is, incredibly safe, but, then that could open them up to, criminal persecution. So not legally safe. And I think, on medication abortion, one thing that I was really wanting to speak with you about is sort of what we can learn from feminists in the global South. And I think, certainly medication abortion is one thing. It's incredibly safe, very effective, but here in the US, a lot less is known about it. Still, many people confuse it with emergency contraception. It's certainly not available, over the counter. And it's blowing up on Instagram now. Like there's a lot of attention being given to it, and the New York Times actually did a piece this week where they interviewed the head of Las Libres, which is an accompaniment network in Guanajuato, Mexico. And, she was talking about how her whole life she had thought of, sort of Roe as this gold standard. But now she's realizing that the work that, she has done of ensuring, access to medication abortion in Mexico is actually, much more important in many ways. And I think, there's a lot that we can learn from the global South and from feminists. With the Asia Safe Abortion Partnership, for example, I remember the first time that I attended a youth advocacy institute, I was really blown away by the language and how you all really clearly talked about the connections between systems of oppression and abortion rights. And, here in the United States, even with progressive media, there's like this fear, use really cautious words. We talk about, conservative views or old fashioned views, and my least favorite, pro-life views. But you don't hear folks describing anti-abortion views as extremist, as racist, as misogynist, as violent. You don't hear that, and we need to hear that. I think another piece that we have to learn is, essentially the intersectionality, right? So there's an article that I'll share with you that was really good. It's in The Guardian. It was written by one of the leaders of the Ni Una Menos movement in Argentina. And she was talking about how, one of the reasons that the movement was so successful in Argentina is because they were, able to weave together the struggle for, abortion with other feminist struggles, such as economic violence, gender-based violence. And, then you can see how, the violence of unsafe abortion, the violence of forced motherhood, is connected to, violence against, Indigenous women. And this, this is again something that in the United States we haven't been able to do as successfully.
I kept coming across some posts from organizations who work in that particular region, and they were very they were sharing a lot of information on Instagram with regards to self-managed abortion. It's absolutely flooded, and there are some very important tips also coming up. I think these are tips that we can keep handy anyway, all across the world. People were just advising people to keep abortion pills with you, even in case you're not pregnant, just in case you might get. So just so keep those abortion pills. So I was just thinking that so just imagine if this was the norm, and if we talk about birth control pill, and we talk about how normalized that is. When will come a time when we'll have these conversations of human rights being connected to your right to have a safe abortion. Again, a conversation coming from the Black community from US, that now that predominantly white women's privilege of getting an abortion is questioned, now that's a direct attack on that. So now the conversation on abortion, even within the development sector, even within the SRHR, the feminist network, the conversation has blown up. So why weren't these conversations being had before for marginalized communities, for Black women, for Hispanic women? So that was also something that was interesting.
Absolutely. And it's right. So now you're on the streets, now that it's affecting you, and that's not enough. And I think we've seen that also in the work with other movements. So there's been a really powerful conversation happening between disability rights and abortion rights activists, thanks to some work that Korea and India organized. Really recognizing that the right has historically used disability as sort of a wedge issue to try and divide the movement. And so, recognizing that, to advance abortion rights, essentially recognizing that you can advance abortion rights and disability rights, at the same time, they're not mutually exclusive. But importantly, what the disability rights community has pointed out, to the reproductive rights community, is that, you can't ask us to show up for your issue, just now because it's convenient for you and because you need us. Where were you when we weren't able to access reproductive health care? Where were you when we were trying to get, attention for the needs of our community? So, you can't just show up when it's convenient, you have to always show up. And I think, when communities do show up and do work together, that's when you can actually, make progress and have diverse movements.
Yeah, absolutely. And adding on to that, I think that's something that we also realized. I think last year there were in context with the people living with disabilities and them being able to access SRHR services, and we talk about being inclusive, we talk about having that sort of intersectionality. But then we were holding certain conversations when we realized that even the SRHR terminologies and phrases, for those phrases, sign language doesn't exist. So, when we're talking about that kind of inclusion, are we really going into the root of it and making sure that, we're setting the foundation right? So, I think we're all sort of learning, unlearning in these processes. And as we go through difficult circumstances together, we realize and understand each other's problems and, sort of try to work together. And I think that's how we will be able to make it better.
And starting young. I mean, again, I think that's another thing that the Asia Safe Abortion Partnership has done so well, is involving young people. I think, abortion is a human right. And so therefore there's no reason why we shouldn't be talking about it, with kids, with young people. And, I myself am guilty of this. I was ranting the other day about the Texas 6-week ban. And my son, who's 11, was like, what are you talking about? I was like, oh, they're trying to restrict, healthcare for women in Texas. And he was like, you mean abortion? I was like, oh my gosh, I'm guilty of this too. Yes, I mean abortion. But I think, again, there's this hesitancy to involve young people. And if you don't involve young people and you don't start young, shooting ourselves in our foot.
Yeah. And I think it's great. They also bring in a lot on the table. I think their energy with regards to the whole issue, and when that understanding is absolutely clear. When, like I said, when we start to unlearn and then relearn certain things, I think the amount of creativity and the amount of passion that they bring for the issue, to talk about the issue, is something that ASAP has been built on, and I think hopefully will grow forward with the same ideals. So and before we close the conversation, just one last point that I mentioned before regarding what would your advice be, what would your words of motivation be to other funders out there who would be watching this video and who have been supporting the movement, the safe abortion rights movement in their country, region, or beyond. So how can they what would their role be in such a situation where we're moving towards more restrictive laws or more restrictive perspective towards abortion and the whole conversation around SRHR? So if you could share a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I want to plug a recent publication that I can share with you that I think is excellent by Guttmacher. It's called "Here's How Philanthropy Can Protect Access to Abortion in a Post-Roe World." And the main point there, again, is that funders need to be supporting groups closest to the problem. So in this case, with abortion access, we already know that it's going to disproportionately affect, women of color, immigrants, women living with disabilities, LGBTQ groups, and so fund groups led by those communities. I think that's the most important message. And then what I would add to that, is fund these groups using a trust-based philanthropy model. And this is really a model that I've always used, that I'm a huge fan of, and it really recognizes how philanthropy has actually contributed to the systemic inequities that we see, and both in terms of the way that money is allocated, the way it's controlled, the way it's distributed. And this model seeks to change that and to really shift power. And it does that by funding groups flexibly for the long term, and trusting these organizations to do the work that they do so well. And I think the right has been funding this way for a very, very long time. The groups that are busy trying to undermine women's rights are not, drafting 20-page proposals and filling out log frames. So we, the progressive funding community needs to learn to do this differently, and to really trust the folks doing the work. So that would be my plug.
Wow, I think that was amazing. I think we won't hear a lot of funders saying exactly those things. So thank you so much for adding that. And I do, like, from the other end, I would definitely like to say, adding on to what you said. Definitely the culture of the whole, where the focusing on the money and focusing on the whole, for example, the whole reporting sort of concept, where organizations or individual or groups who are working on ground become sort of accountable just to the funders and just to where that monetary support is coming from. And sort of it's easy to then lose ground of what's really happening, the work with the community especially, and what impact is being really created there. So absolutely, I think, like you said, I think it's going to come from again, we have to look at the power dynamics. So I think here the power lies with the with the funders, or with the big organizations sort of supporting the local and regional ones. So I think it's great that you shared that, and I really hope a lot of people do watch it and take some tips from this interview. So yeah, anything else you wanted to share? Any last thoughts you wanted to add?
I think the point that you just made is an important one that I want to emphasize. This, again, with the funders, I think what you and I have been talking about for the last few minutes is how abortion is not an isolated issue. It's deeply connected with so many other rights, and to advance abortion rights, we have to do so in a framework that advances other human rights and that connects it to other movements. And so again, from a funding perspective, if you have this very narrow, restricted project to try and advance abortion rights, that doesn't allow for this sort of cross-movement work, for this intersectional approach that is so needed. And I think it can actually be harmful to approach it in that way. So yes. I hope there's a funder with lots of money out there that's listening.
Yes, here's hoping. Fingers crossed. And yeah, I hope to see you in person soon sometime.
Me too. Me too. I
really,
miss India more than I can tell you.
Yeah, hope sometime soon. Hope that plan happens. So great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Talk soon.
Yeah, you please take care.